This clip is brought to you by SaveWithConrad.com.
Well, the biggest thing that's happening to Jerry Brisco's wrestling career is a move that's made outside the squared circle. The Briscoes turned heel against Steamboat and Youngblood, and they were drawing some amazing crowds. But in the process, the Briscoes become part owners of Georgia Championship Wrestling. They're wondering, was there still money to be made in this end of the business as they're watching Vince McMahon's expansion of the WWF? Georgia and Florida were frankly struggling as territories. Supposedly Jack goes to Jim Barnett at the time and lets him know that he's going to have to take advantage of their national platform on TBS and start expanding, which Barnett turns down. Barnett's alleged heavy spending wasn't helping matters within the organization, and a move was made to put Ole in charge of Georgia Championship Wrestling. Remember we were talking about how wrestling back then almost seemed mob-esque? Well, here it is again.
Yeah.
Ole gets the company right again, but of course it's making money and everyone's making money from the agreement, but the Briscoes don't think they're getting their fair share. And the rumors at the time were that the Briscoes were talking with folks about selling their points, possibly to Jim Crockett. The biggest part is that of this entire story is that Georgia has the only wrestling show on TBS. So what we know is going to become the Crockett time slot, if you will, was Georgia Championship Wrestling. This predates Crockett's run on TBS. Eventually, as we know, the Briscoes sit down with Vince McMahon and make a deal to sell him the territory with this TBS time slot for a reported $750,000. Carry me through this. What do you remember about, I think they called it Black Saturday.
Right. Well, all of us are wrestling fans. We're aware, Georgia Championship Wrestling was a big deal because, if you're a promoter, and you wanted to get a talent over, you'd call Barnett, my boy. Conrad, if you wanted to get booked, Barnett would have booked you. I love those chinks. My God. He looks like a lumberjack. I'll get him a big plaid shirt. Briscoes, basically, they had their points that they had in the company, gave them that was all McMahon needed to have the majority vote, shall we say. And the Briscoes sold their share to Vince, and it caused an uproar. And of course, Jack and Jerry were kind of ostracized to some of the traditional NWA people like Ole. Didn't make any friends in that deal, but they made a lot of money. And they showed you they're businessmen. They didn't think they were getting their fair. They don't see, they're, from what I understand, they were leery of the first count. By that, I mean, back in the old days, before computerized ticketing, when their tickets were sold, hard tickets, roll tickets, whatever you want to call it. The first person to get a count was the promoter. So what the promoter said was what it was. And Jack and Jerry disbelieved, and a lot of those guys were doing audits. Audits meaning they would have a plant in the house clicking attendance. And so pretty close how many people were there. And was that count off from what the promoter was giving you? And I think that was the case here. They thought they were being shorted and they weren't getting their fair share because of the first count rule. And that was a bold move. That was a bold move. I remember Cowboy telling me all about that deal, because I think at one time he was a stockholder. I think he ended up selling his too, but not to Vince. I think he sold out before all that stuff started. But he was the booker there for a long time. Cowboy was. So that's kind of how it was. When people say it's not about the money, Connie, it's all about the money. And that was all about the money for the Briscoes. And it's a business. They had a chance to increase their own personal value and to get a big infusion of cash. And that's what they did.
As the rumor goes, it's like they felt perhaps Ole was being too cautious with the money, and that Barnett was maybe being too frivolous with the money. And there had often been people sort of freestyling that maybe Barnett had a quote unquote skim set up. Boy, this all sounds very mob-like. Did you ever hear anything about that?
Well, you just knew it happened.
All right.
It happened everywhere. It wasn't Georgia Championship Wrestling and Jim Barnett or Ole Anderson or whomever it may be, you want to bring in the story. They weren't inventing anything new. So veteran wrestlers, the guys that had grown up in the territory era, like the Briscos, they were well aware of all this scenario. So, and of course, at the same time, I don't know how it affected a relationship with Eddie Graham, but they had Eddie on their side more often than not, and that was a big bonus for them. So, but it was every territory that had roll tickets. You think that, I don't know that, I've talked to wrestlers that worked in virtually every territory since 1974, and they all said the same thing. The skim.
Yeah.
It's first count. That's as simple as that. You get 10,000 people who know we only had 8. Well, there you go. So how are you going to prove they didn't have 8?
Right.
You have no proof. And you got a decent payday, but not as much as you would have gotten if they had given a true count. And I think the Briscoes just got full of that, tired of that scenario. And then they had a chance to hit a big payday, their biggest payday ever with Vince, and they took it.
It's something that I've heard Jerry sort of joke about before. Wrestling fans refer to July 14th, 1984, where Vince McMahon walks out on screen on the World Championship Wrestling set, and he shakes hands with Freddie Miller, and they're essentially introducing the World Wrestling Federation, not Georgia Championship Wrestling that fans had grown up with and become accustomed to. Fans would refer to this as Black Saturday. I've heard Jerry refer to this as Green Saturday because this is the most money he had ever made in wrestling at that point.
Yeah, it was a business deal. And, people are going to listen to this and say, well, Briscoes were unloyal. No, they're loyal to themselves and their family. They both had children. They both had wives. They both had homes. They both had mortgages. And they were also smart enough, Conrad, to know that this gravy train of taking bumps and traveling and the physicality, the no all season scenario cannot last forever. It's just illogical to perceive that it can. And so I think they made a very smart business deal that a lot of folks did not see coming, and it shocked the wrestling world, quite frankly, when it did occur.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you're going to notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at SaveWithConrad.com.